Hello everyone, it's Amy Williams here for the You Perform channel, and we have Charlie, our mental performance expert here. Now last week we all had some practical homework to do where we had to go away writing down a little bit of a ladder of examples of stresses in your daily life, in that competition, that you could go away and basically practice that stress to get used to it. And we realised, and Charlie taught us, that stress isn't necessarily a bad thing. Now today we're going to be going through a bit more of that, going a little bit deeper, and you're going to give us a nice kind of story example yourself that hopefully we can relate to in our own lives.
Yeah, because I fully appreciate with this subject that the ideas kind of people like and understand. However, there's nothing quite like hearing a case study and of what that looked like. And for me, this is a case study about mental training for nerves. And it was my own journey really going through this. And it was as a pentathlete. When I did pentathlon, it was purely focused on the shooting event, which was the event where for me, nerves could really get the better of you. Every day in training, you would just score, your top marks every single time, because how difficult is it just to sort of bring a pistol up, squeeze the trigger, bang, and the shot goes straight through the center of the target. And then you get to competition, and suddenly, you start wobbling,
shaking,
and you notice how you feel, and shooting's a nightmare because it's such a dexterous sport. You're talking about very, very fine motor control. And this, of course, was a problem for most people, and one that a lot of people didn't really know how to deal with. So what I'd love to do is share with you the journey that I went on, going from being arguably possibly one of the worst athletes in the world at suffering from this to one of the best, and how I did that, and what deliberate things I did using the stuff we've done in the previous vlogs to put it all together and make it work.
All right, I like the sound of this. I kind of feel like we need to get your pens and paper ready again. Get yourself sorted, and this could be a really good practical session to be listened to now.
And I'll try and make it as practical as possible, because that's what this is all about, right, as a case study. And for me, the realisation I needed to do this started after my first World Cup, and I had a terrible experience. 7 o'clock in the morning, shooting, first event of 5 in pentathlon. And the expectation was huge, because it was probably the one event I expected myself to get ahead on, because I was so, I could shoot well in training. Which I think that added expectation was one of my stresses. Going on that ladder of challenge, expectation to do well is definitely one of those things which I hadn't really thought about how I challenged. So that then led to a lot of sort of physical nerves, and to be honest, it became overwhelming. I was there, my first shot, and I was shaking so much, pulled the trigger, missed the target completely. And then, of course, it spiraled out of control. There's no way that I could sort of come back to that, or felt like I couldn't. I was ready to give up, to be honest, because I thought I was so reliant on my shooting compared to the other disciplines, that if I couldn't do that consistently at the big competitions, what was the point? But luckily, I had some really good conversations, and with my psychologist at the time, and I started to work through the things that I knew about psychology and pull together some of the ideas that we've discussed, and thinking, well, actually, how do I incorporate breathing, relaxation, visualization? Because at the moment, it's a bit haphazard at best. Or worse still, I'm trying to use those things when it's too late. I'm not using them proactively. I'm not training them every day. I'm using them in competition when I think I need to use them. So that was the first step, is overcoming that. Mentally, the first thing I did was sort of redefine what I was trying to do. I was overcomplicating it. I have to take 20 shots, and the score you get is the sum of those 20 shots. Now, if all I'm thinking about is the overall score, I'm not focused on each individual shot. So I simplified what the goal was from a score that I wanted to get over 20 shots, which could be a 45-minute shooting session, to simply repeating the perfect shots 20 times. And weirdly, that just completely changed the way I viewed the sport. All I'm trying to do is just go through a routine which lasts 1 minute. And I'm just going to practice that routine. And after each time, I'll stop, reset, and then I'll do the same routine for 1 minute. In fact, the more boring you can make it, the more effective it is. So that was the first thing. It was more of a mental thing. It was redefining the goal of what I'm trying to do. It's like a marathon runner or an ultra distance runner, breaking the goal down into chunks, whether it's 1 mile at a time, and being able to have goals that allow you to define success for that mile. Relaxing, smiling, noticing what's going on around you, maintaining a rhythm, maintaining form, focusing on your arms, focusing on your breathing. There are so many things that we can productively control. So that was the first thing. Make sense?
It does, and I'm kind of, in my head trying to think, actually, you're just trying to break it down as if you were maybe explaining it to a 10-year-old. Actually, if you can break it down in those kind of little practical chunks, then maybe that is making it a bit more simple for yourself. Like you say, just really making it simple.
Yeah.
Changing how you think about it in your head.
Yeah, and it's only when a 10-year-old becomes concerned about the overall results that they start to think of what they're doing as having an impact at the end of it, rather than just staying focused on what's in front of you. So basically 1 shot repeated 20 times. Very different mindset. What I started to do in training is I realised that in training it was easy just to turn up, you got your pistol out, and you just started shooting. Because very often in training you were relaxed, you come in the morning and your friends are around you.
Having a little chat.
Chat about, what happened yesterday in the football on TV or whatever, and then you just start shooting. And of course you shoot, you're kind of relaxed. It's not too difficult to get into that focus. And there aren't many things competing for your attention at that point either. So we don't have any of those stresses on that ladder because we haven't invited them. And I realised that was wrong, because suddenly being able to do it in competition meant that I had to have a whole load of different coping strategies in competition. And the sport just felt completely different in competition. So I needed to invite those things into training. So the challenges that I invited into training, I come in now much earlier. So the first thing is that I was always one of the first to arrive. I would sit behind my shooting position, because that's what you have to do in a competition. You've got to sit behind for a long period of time whilst other things go on. And what I would do is I would just start to work on my breathing, because what we know is that if we're breathing incorrectly, if we're breathing very shallow, light breathing, we are inviting that stress response. That might not feel as much of a problem in training, but when we get to competition it is. So why aren't I practicing it in training as part of my routine? So sit down early, start getting into my breathing, deep relaxing breathing, and then my relaxation, as we've covered. And then, as we know, the visualization. What I would do is I'd visualize being in a competition. I'd visualize, I'd pick a venue that I knew from a World Cup, for example, and I would just imagine what it was like to be at that venue. In particular, the sights, what I noticed, what I saw, the buzz, all the people around, the noise, even like the smell of the venue, big open halls. They're very often done in sports halls. And I would allow myself just to immerse myself in that environment. As a result, what happened? My heart rate went up. That was good. I'm inviting the stress. I'm inviting the nerves, because that's what happens when you're in those environments. So what do? I go back to my breathing, and I focus on my breathing, my relaxation, then go back to the visualization until I reach a state of almost equilibrium where I'm natural in that environment. I'm okay. I'm existing effectively. I am myself. I'm happy in that environment. Weirdly, when I first started doing this, sometimes this could take about 20 minutes of pure mental work. And I was just imagining. Now, meanwhile, in the real training session, other members of the training team were coming in, the British team, wondering what on earth I was doing, and sometimes laughing because they had no idea what I was trying to do, and I had to be okay with that. And as I moved into sort of that competition visualization, I imagined going up, unboxing my pistol, and starting to take the perfect shot, going through my perfect shot routine, which I had as really 3 stages, which was to, I called it calm. So you'd load the pistol, take a nice deep breath and come up and go calm, control, sights, bang, like that. And just imagine the shot going straight through the center of the target. Then 1 breath relaxation, like a complete release breath. Then 1 breath visualization, so I'd visualize my next shot. And then I would actually take my next shot. And that all fitted perfectly within the timing of the competition. So I would be imagining this stuff. Now I'm happy with the environment I'm in. I'm happy with my routine. Now I'm doing it. Every shot is perfect. It's relaxed. As long as I could do that well for at least 10 shots, then I would physically stand up, and now my physical practice session would start. I went from doing about 75 shots per training session normally, just a physical session, turning up, unboxing the pistol, bam, 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 bang, to on average 20 to 25 shots. So about a third of the number of shots. And my performance in competition started to do that. I was physically training about a third of the amount. I was mentally training a lot more. And suddenly I was so much more comfortable in competition environments. It was my domain. I loved it. I loved seeing other people panicking and seeing other people get sort of, overwhelmed by. And for me, I just became part of that environment. I think a lot of people thought I was mad initially. I spent so much time behind the range with my eyes closed. I genuinely think, is he really tired or what's going on? Is he all right?
But I guess you had the confidence to do that, didn't you? You had the confidence to realise you didn't just need to nilly-dilly, shoot, bang, 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 chat about the weather, chat about the football, shoot, and actually not even have a real quality session. You had the confidence to be able to scale that all back, realise you had to do more in your head. And I think, like you said, what rang a bell, me listening to your story, was it's the people. When you said you were imagining the hall or your competition environment, the people. And I guess for you and for anyone, when you're competing in a big competition, it's the crowd and that environment that is the really hard thing that you can't practice. So where they're sat around you, how close they are, I'm guessing has a massive effect on how you can perform. And the noise from people, and that is a really hard thing. So I guess at least if you sat down and had your eyes shut and you visually saw that hall with your targets, where the people were, are they all sat behind you? Are they sat in front of you? Are they sat to the sides, that you could try and imagine?
So what I do, it's a great point. And there are 2 things actually that you said there that I just want to really reinforce, because confidence was one. You're absolutely spot on. It takes confidence to adopt new routines. It's so easy to rock up to training and do what everyone else is doing. To have the confidence to stand apart. I remember with the skeleton athletes, once they became comfortable with the idea of visualization, why it was such a fundamental part of what they do, because you only get to go down twice a day, 58 seconds, and you're at the bottom of the mountain. So to get them more comfortable, not only did they learn how to do it, but we got them doing that in public places, so that people could, this is who I am, this is what I do, and this is how I do it, and I'm okay with that. So you're right, confidence is huge. And the more, I think, if I can give you permission to do this, maybe that's one barrier to overcome. It's like, oh, well, Charlie said it, so, I'm going to have a go at it. And but do it, practice it. The other thing, the nice idea there around people, and people being around you, and you can never, you're having to it's a leap of your own imagination to imagine what that's actually going to be like, different environments, different people. It's a great example of that ladder of challenge we spoke about last week, because although you can't physically practice, you can't get rent-a-crowd in, well you could, but it might get a bit expensive. What I used to do is go to competitions when I wasn't competing in order to practice my mental processes and routines. I used to practice that in the shooting hall. So at a World Cup, I would normally be there if I was competing, but the women might compete the day before. So I'd go to the women's competition, I'd sit in the shooting hall, and I'd go through my full mental routine, breathing, relaxing, visualizing, and then going through visualization my whole 20-shot competition. It was mentally exhausting, and I have to say that now. To do this well, you're practicing intensity, so you feel that intensity, but be okay with that because you're adapting to that positively, you're inviting it, and you're getting better at it. So that's how I would deal with that, is I would actually rock up to competitions not to compete, but to mentally train. Fencing was the same. I would practice spending time in that fencing hall with the noises and the screams of people winning, and I would practice my routines, my repertoires, my technical skills, my processes, whilst having other people in the room creating that environment for me.
Because that's got hard. I have watched a few fencing competitions because we had actual mutual friends, didn't we? You know, my friends when I was training were, as it happened, the modern pentathlon team. And I remember going and watching and being at the London Olympics, watching it all, trying to see specific ones to watch friends. And for you, it's hard because in the fencing, you've got several people all competing at the same time, haven't you? So you might suddenly have a cheer because France have won a point and their whole crowd are going wild while you're still trying to concentrate, or your teammate might have suddenly done well or not so well, and you have to cope with all these different things going on, but yet try and shut them out and ignore them and just still do your thing and keep that concentration rather than suddenly hearing this like crazy wild cheer in the corner.
And it is wild, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean, because
the
opponents will deliberately get in your face and scream in your face if they beat you.
Yeah.
And it's just, I mean, it's peacocking, isn't it? But it's sports, it's allowed. And to be, you're absolutely right. And to be in that environment, going through your routines, processes, and to control your response. Because I don't know about you, I mean, I'm quite a passive guy. And when I had to first learn how to compete in those environments, those very aggressive environments, it wasn't natural to me. And which is funny considering I come from the army. But, again, the army are brilliant at training your capacity to be aggressive when you need to be aggressive, but to be calm and considered when you need to be calm and considered. So I guess that probably helped me. But part of that process, in parallel with the army, was about being able to, you hear that scream, your heart rate goes up because it's a natural instinct as a human being. What do? Release, refocus, okay, if you need to do that. Really good examples from there. And I guess what we've taken, we spoke about shooting, we've spoken about fencing. We could go through every sport and look at the various nuances of that sport. But I just really encourage you to think about what it means for your sport. What are some of those challenges? And how can you incorporate those pillars that we spoke about, the breathing, relaxation, visualization, as well as how do you break it down into something very simple that you can remind yourself, fundamentally, I am here to do this, one step at a time. And if you can do that, that also helps you to refocus as well. So there's a lot in there, but hopefully that's useful in terms of bringing it to life and practicing getting good at nerves.
And I think, like you say, it is just breaking it down into really bite-sized chunks, having that confidence to sit there. I think I got quite used to it. You'd walk into a warm-up hut at the top of a bobsleigh skeleton run, and you might find bobsleigh athletes going through it. They do it quite differently because they're practicing, they steer differently, the drivers. So you might stand in and there's a big 6 foot six guys standing there doing all this kind of like crazy stuff, like rocking around, moving his arms, practicing, a bit over exaggerated. And then there'd be the skeleton lot sitting there, maybe just rolling our shoulders, tilting our head. And it was just normal to walk into this a room with half the people with their eyes shut, doing weird movements, but that was you going through it. So
I mean, to anyone else, that'd be a loony signing,
anyone walking in who didn't know what the rest of us were doing. But you didn't care and you weren't embarrassed by it. It was just normal, because like you say, we only had 2 times to go down a day. So everything had to be felt through the body, eyes shut, going through it, visualizing. So to be able to feel confident to make that normal.
And there are some who do that better than others. It's what I noticed working with the squad, is that you would get some, because what you might see is people doing that, but I'm guessing, you might tell me if I'm wrong, I'm guessing that some people are really applying the pressure that they need to in their head, because it's quite aggressive, isn't it?
When we're steering,
Whereas other people might just be going through the motions, and there is a difference. You've got to recreate that intensity and invite that intensity as best as possible.
You know what? I love bouncing off each other. I love hearing your stories, and then my memory goes back to my old world. And hopefully for all of you lot listening, that was really helpful, that you can go away and get some real practical little tidbits from Charlie's story. Now, next week, if you tune in, what are we going to be talking about, Charlie? What are we going to go through?
I think we're doing a Q&A next week, so we're able to answer your questions that you have on this and other topics.
Nice, I like the sound of that. Well, thank you for listening. It's been wonderful having you here. Please hit the button, subscribe as always, tell your friends and family, and we will see you next time.